So at Bamboo we expect students to be respectful, and this type of behavior and repeated behavior has created some issue in those manners of being respectful. And then we would like to reteach you about those values and how we're going to be respectful, and what is the benefit of being respectful, and why do we need to be respectful. So we navigate to build our language around being respectful rather than the bad consequence of your behavior, and then so that they're able to learn and adapt and more acceptive to the change of behavior. And then teach knowledge, so those social, emotional, and behavioral skills, and actively acknowledging expected behavior. So then when we monitor their behavioral change, we have a guideline, a very clear guideline for them to do as well. There's a goal, being respectful, so which is very, very clear, rather than avoid being punished. So these are two different motivations. One, you can see the light from God and being construct and build, but then avoid being punished. It's it's a negative lens. Okay, so we're trying to focus on the positive lens. So then prevent and respond means fostering the partnership and responding to unwanted behavior in a respectful, instructional manner rather than purely punitive. So that is even for our educators, when we have those behaviors from students, so which means that the manner we behave is also still need to be consistent with respectful and responsible behavior. Because in the Bible said that do not do evil for evil, right? Overcome evil by evil. Because if we act in a very angry mode, and that will be more trigger a very defensive and protective approach, which means that the door is shut down. The kids wouldn't want to change, okay? Would be refusal to change because they feel hurt when you're angry to them. Okay, that's a very natural human response. Mm. So the way that we would want ourselves to be demonstrating the character of God is to be respectful, regardless. So that's how God's treating us. Even though when we're sinful, even though we do naughty things, but He still accepts us, and He still comforts us when we are doing something that we may even be shameful of ourselves, and we feel burdened. But then God still accepts us. So I know that as teacher, it's not possible at all times that you're acting in a Christ manner. So therefore, when we act together with a team, when you really feel troubled, then in Australia, usually when we have student consultation or conference with those a bit challenging matters, you can ask another teacher as your support person to be there as well. And also because in Australia it has really strict child safety issues, and students are actually very hard to discipline because they could complain make lots of complaints. So therefore, having another person is also a protection, to have an evidence as a witness of what's happening in the situation, and yes, just also to protect us as well, not just in the sense of legal protection, but also in how we protect ourselves, act more godly when we have another adult. Because sometimes when we're just facing one-on-one with another student, sometimes we may feel dominant, and we may not be guaranteed to be always respectful to another young person. So that is also protecting our own behavior as well. Okay. So it's a layering targeted and intensive interventions. So the tier 2 is to providing additional practice for academic and behavioral skills, and increasing school-family communication and adult supervision. So for this tier 2, there can be a whole range of issues. So family, so I don't know here, but in Australia, we often have students have suicidal tendencies. Okay, so and then, which means that academically they may need a little bit more support as well, so that they don't feel that they're just not coping and just drop out eventually. So, and I will also, in the subsequent trainings, some students are born with some special needs or learning difficulties, and we will need to be equipped to be able to identify those learning difficulties, ADHD or dyscalculia or dyslexia or autism. So some social emotional issues. So a lot of hindrances can be very crucial for their development. So these are the areas we'll be able to. We don't have in Australia. It's very expensive to actually make professional assessment as well for those issues, and I suppose psychologically as well, because depression and anxiety are very common in young people, and that's probably the second biggest killer for the children nowadays. It's not actually the physical problems, but the mental challenges that they're experiencing, and how we support in those depression and anxiety space, and anger management. When they have those underlying depression and anxiety, then they will have anger management issues and relational breakdowns, and therefore gradually drop out. So, our family nowadays in the society is broken. A lot of broken families, and then therefore those emotional and relational vulnerability are very common in our student cohort. So, so as you all mentioned, they're very clinging because their parents are not here. So we're halfly behaving as a parents in a way. So I can imagine. I haven't experienced yet. In Australia, it's a very different setting because we do require to have a professional boundary with students, very clear boundaries, no social media, and a lot of boundaries, etc. But here I might need to adapt a little bit more to have a bit more intimate, a closer relationship with the students. But we'll see how we work in those space. Okay. And then tier 3 is the actions. So as we, in our orientation booklet yesterday, then there will be some logs that we'll need to do and trackers. So that's some of the system we're going to build. So for the leadership, I suppose in our school, everybody's a leader in a way. We're all leaders. When students are here, we're all leaders. Okay? And so it's a shared vision. And we have representative leaderships, the multidisciplinary team meeting regularly with expertise in equity, wellness, and academics. So with this year, we're having a student affairs dean, and therefore we'll take a bit more pivotal role in those, for example, more tiered areas, okay, as opposed to the tiered and tier 2 areas. But then teachers will make sure that 80%, at least make 80% students are well on track, and then that in that way that the students can be well established. And administrative involvement, professional development, that's the area I'll be looking at, doing a lot more training and development in those areas, and active family engagement. So therefore, if we are communicating a lot more with the parents, so they wouldn't just take one-sided opinion from their kids, because kids would always communicate with their parents in a very different manner, or in a very different lens. But if we are continuing with the communication, then the parents may see a very balanced approach. So some of the good schools, or if we are able, we can actually do some professional development with our parents as well. Yes, so some schools do run seminars, parent seminars, and then therefore the parents are educated about the social emotional development of their kids, and how they would respond when kids have those challenging times, or how to manage a relationship with their own child can be an important lesson for them to know. Unfortunately, in China, a lot of parents may not be intentionally doing those type of learning, but if we can give them a bit of spiritual food or knowledge food, and they're more capable or more engaged with our Christ-centered education approach. And then we have our system of data collection. Yes, there will be some logs, and that's something we'll discuss, how we work together and then build up those collection of data. Not only just the negative behaviors, but the good behaviors, how we collect those data, and then be able to acknowledge what are the venues for us to acknowledge, and what are the ways we can praise or encourage our students. So then when we implement this framework, then we can, will transcend just behavioral management. It builds a predictable, safe, and equitable ecosystem. So it's equitable, that improves academic success, elevates school climate, and ultimately supports the well-being of both students and educators. Okay, so that's works both ways. That we're able to work together. Okay, I think that's the framework and how that would look like for the PB4L blueprint. 9:40. So in my, so I have previously shared our implementation plan. So let me see. Okay, so this is the document. Okay. So when we implement this PB4L, right. Okay. So as we know that we from value to behavior, so respect. So we'll need to be able to translate those language from, as yesterday, we just continue from the training yesterday, we all understand our PB4L pillar. We've got 4 core values as we identified: respect, responsibility, resilience, integrity, and which is we have biblical foundation as well to why we are educating students for those values. You know, they could argue with you about why you don't allow me to eat chocolate in my classroom, right? Or I'm hungry and I'm a human and you should have mercy on me. You know, there are so many ways that they can argue. When somebody wants to argue a matter, there's so many millions of ways they can make an argument with you. However, but then we want to be that they're not just argue with a person. It's not a power struggle. So we need to always remove that me element from those arguments to be that it's principle and it's biblical principle based. Okay, so that we're not having that direct relational breakdown with the students. And then God's word is always more powerful than our own words. So then, okay, so but our human aspect in this is we translate what does that mean and then consistently apply. So in classroom, you could establish, it's just an example here, listen when others are speaking and value different ideas and perspectives. That is what respect means in your classroom. And then you would model it and you would praise the students who is listening, and also shows valuing others more, including other people's behaviors, inclusive of other people's perspectives in your class. So then that is respect, and you could, oh, that's very respectful of you saying that. You know, you could praise them directly, explicitly. And then responsibility. So usually our practice in Australia is we would grade students outside of classroom before they enter into the classroom, and then they would lining up rather than just coming in. So because classroom management starts from outside of the class door already. Okay, and it also gives that sense a sense of authority and also welcoming at the same time, because God is not just a God of love, which is spoiled love, but God is also justful as well. So when we practice those different characteristics of God, and we will have to, merge those together. So when we wait for students, it also gives the authority that teacher has the authority over this classroom. And this classroom is managed by teacher. And it's not a place that you can randomly come in and do whatever you want. Okay, you are coming at the time that the teacher would welcome you to come. Okay, and then when you leave the classroom, you would leave the place as what the teacher would expect this place to be. Okay, so this place under your authority, and it's a sacred place, and how sacred you want it to be, it's how you work with your students. And that actually starts from waiting for them at the door and establish. And then, for example, responsibility is to arrive prepared, follow routines, and complete their learning responsibilities. So this is where you show your teacher's expertise about how much work or what's your learning, what's your designated learning objective for that particular lesson. Okay, and the amount of work that you'll allocate for them to complete work with you, to learn, and that's to be the right load or rightful amount to their cognitive learning. It's not too heavy, but it's challenging enough for them to learn. Okay, responsibility. And resilience means that they are able to attempt challenging work and ask for help and learn from mistakes. Okay, so help them to build up the resilience step by step by appropriate to your year level, and how they would handle if they don't know, because asking for help can be something really challenging for some students from China as well, because sometimes they would see asking for help even as a bit humiliating to themselves. Yes, it's a big face issue. So you need to it's a face issue. So asking for help, there'll be different ways. Okay, you could make it very discreetly that okay, on the whiteboard, if you still have questions, and you can just leave, or you can give them a piece of paper anonymously. If you have questions, then you can just hand in and put on my desk before you leave the classroom. You know, sometimes you can just to do some different activities so that they're able to save their face, but they still give you the question. Okay, so they're able to ask for help. And sometimes you could even create some surveys for them to give you a bit of feedback as well, so that you know the teaching and learning needs to be two ways. Okay, if you only see a one way of classroom that you just transmitting all the knowledge, then that's not a functional classroom anymore in nowadays, especially when the World Wide Web is available for everyone. Knowledge is everywhere. We're in the end times that knowledge is exploding and increasing. So therefore, teacher is more like a facilitator, and our goal should be 80% on our learners and 20% on the knowledge itself, because how we help our learners to equip the knowledge that you want them to equip is the main focus area. So there'll be lots of crossover communication. If you find just directly communicating with them doesn't work, written communications or survey communications or some different way of communication, we can explore those options as well. And then integrity. So that is part that I think Chinese students from China will need to be explicitly teach a lot more in terms of complete their own work. For example, you've mentioned about cheating in exam or writing assessment tasks with AI. So how they complete their own work honestly and acknowledge the ideas and the work of others and own their own behavior or, behavioral issues, and those are the expectations. You could expand a lot more with an A4 size of paper, particularly for the subject you want to teach. And even for some science subject, if you have lab practices, you would probably have some lab specific behavioral expectations. And playgrounds, if you have playground activities for year 5 or 6, probably, I don't know if you have a playtime, so some playtime expectations. Okay, so canteen so I think one way I'll so can queue patiently. So canteen could be, even in the canteen, we can still remind students of those things, okay? Because we wouldn't expect the canteen staff would be jumping out and then maintain the order. So I think somewhat everyone, if we are there and we see things happening, we do have a responsibility of making sure the canteen is in order as well. But in a very constructive way, okay, as well. So I see this. Do you mind just, politely ask, can you do this, please? Right? Still, even ask for students to do something, it's still being politely. But if they have constant refusal, then there needs to be a separate, conversation about this. So we don't want so we don't want to escalate, but want to de-escalate the situation. Dormitory, and there'll be some different set of expectations. And then digital space. So when we have the computer lab, we may have a different rule. So those we'll make into posters and put in each classroom. Okay, you can make your own classroom, but I'll make a template to start with, and then you will make your own some tailored area. So because some depends on your own sense of awareness and also the way you want to work with your students. So for some teachers, for example, if the students constantly calling out, or when you are speaking, they talk over you, or the chatting is seen by you as very unrespectful, then you probably need to explicitly mention that, okay, in your behavioral charts, and then so that they are aware, and you've done your duty of educating, and then if they are non-compliant, then we're dealing with it in a different way, okay? But then firstly, we have the duty and the responsibility of educating our students about your expectation, because we can never assume they know what respect means, and then that becomes a negative bit of blaming. Oh, isn't that a common sense? But what you think as common sense may not be the common sense for another person. When you say common sense, it's already your interpreted version of a common sense. It's actually your sense. So, so that we will need to educate them about what is a shared behavioral understanding. So, some example, instead of simply saying stop misbehaving, you can ask, which Bamboo Jaya value do we need here? And then they could reply, so what does that value look like right now? How do we do it? So, and then this moves behavioral management from simply correcting the behavior toward teaching character and appropriate behavior. So that's what we want to do, right? We want to construct the students and building up their character. And then that is an example of that. Okay. So, I'll leave those for you. So our basic step is to teach and model and practice, acknowledge, correct, and restore. Okay, so that's our steps. It's a redemption and restoration process that we are training our students. And that is actually the same process when they learn to do repentance to God. Okay, because even they can't do it with you sometimes openly, but then they can still privately do it with God, and then God will help them to have that to soften their heart, and then eventually restore the relationship. Okay, so we always need to work with God in this space. And some students, I heard, it could be really tough to manage. And then if we are not able to build, but then if we have this process and then steps clearly laid out, we're more possible to be able to restore in the students. Okay, see more success stories. All right, I think that's all for the PB4L today. And I'll leave you some time to firstly navigate this staff resource hub, and then to create yourself as a contact in this space.
It's in our Gmail, bamboojaya.international.school@gmail.com.
We will go to that.
Yeah, you can actually add into your Google account the email. So this one.